Midterm votes matter.
Hello, and welcome to the 2022 Good Trouble Voting Rights Podcast, sponsored by Black Women for Positive Change, featuring host Dr. Stephanie Myers and co-host Reverend Dr. Barbara Reynolds. Ladies, take it away.
Thank you, and hello everyone out there in America. I'm Dr. Stephanie Myers, the National Co-Chair of Black Women for Positive Change. And it is our pleasure to have you with us today because we're going to discuss a very important issue, the issue of voters' rights and the 2022 midterm election that comes up on November 8th, just a few weeks away. I'm sitting in as the host today. Our regular host, Dr. Georgia Dunston, couldn't be with us, but I'm very pleased to be co-hosting and hosting today with our esteemed journalist, Dr. Barbara Reynolds, who's the chaplain for Black Women for Positive Change and one of the first Black people in America to be part of the White House Press Corps. She's a part of history. She's the author of the biography of Coretta Scott King, and we're always proud to have Dr. Reynolds as a part of our show. As I mentioned, November 8th is one of the most important elections, and we're going to discuss that this morning. We're encouraging all citizens to vote, whatever your party affiliation, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Green Party, Purple Party, whatever party you're in, we want you to vote. It's really critical for us to save our democracy. We're also asking all of you to go to our website, blackwomenforpositivechange.org, and sign the John Lewis Good Trouble Voter Rights Pledge Card. Please sign the card. Get your friends and family to sign. And if you can get 100 people to sign the pledge card, you will be eligible for a $200 gift card for Air Jordan sneakers. So get on out there, get those people signed up, and let's get them to the polls. So this morning, Reverend Reynolds and I are going to talk with two women who have not only pledged their right to vote, they have pledged their commitment to working on behalf of citizens in their communities. And these two women are very, very important ladies from two very important cities in the United States, Norfolk, Virginia, and Baltimore, Maryland. Glynis Mason, one of our special guests, is a graduate of Norfolk Public Schools. Now, Norfolk State University is where she got her Bachelor's of Science in Special Education. She also went to Old Dominion University and earned a master's degree in education. She worked in the Norfolk Public School system for 36 years. What a tremendous contribution. And worked as coordinator of the Special Education Parent Resource Center. She's a member of Black Women for Positive Change. She's chair of our Virginia chapter, and she's putting together a votercade in Virginia, which she will talk about during our interview. Welcome, Glynis, and thank you for joining us. And our second guest, who's not really a guest because she's a member also, is Crystal Francis. Crystal has had a great background, and right now she's serving as Assistant Director of Program Management in Custom Executive Education at Georgetown University. She earned her doctorate in Public Policy and Administration, and she has a master's in Homeland Security Management and her bachelor's in Criminal Justice Pre-Law. Crystal has worked as a bipartisan public policy expert for the U.S. Social Security Administration, focusing on income security for seniors and families and people with disabilities. So with that introduction, I hand off to Reverend Dr. Barbara Reynolds, who's going to inquire into what our two ladies are thinking about today.
Well, when I was preparing for this podcast, I thought of what Dr. Martin Luther Jr. Once said about stepping out on faith. And Dr. King said, you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. So, ladies, both of you are stepping out, taking that first step to do something you have never done before. And that to me seems not only difficult, but courageous. So, will each of you explain what motivated you to step out? And we'll start with Glynis and then Crystal.
Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm volunteering for the votercade. As a new member of Black Women for Positive Change, I wanted to participate in an activity that was close to my heart and that would honor the voting legacy of my parents, Archie and Louise Winfield. After our national co-chair, Dr. Myers, asked for volunteers to conduct a votercade established by the Transformative Justice Coalition under the direction of attorney Barbara Antoine, I agreed to do so. And I agreed to do so here in my hometown of Norfolk, Virginia. This is something that voting, the voting rights and the just education and all of that is very close to my heart. And that is something that I've always worked with and continue to work with and strive to do as much as possible so that I can continue to encourage our citizens to vote and provide whatever they need to get them to the polls. So that's why I volunteered to do the votercade.
Um, Crystal, what about you? What motivated you to step out and do
Yes,
something for the first time?
awesome. Yes, thank you for the question. So here in Baltimore County is very unique. The county is growing. There haven't been any African American women representatives on the local county council. And so this actually last year in December, the NAACP and the ACLU filed a lawsuit against the county during redistricting because the maps weren't fair for African American candidates to be competitive in any race in any district. And so as a part of that, the redistricting lines changed and I was encouraged to run for the local county council seat in Baltimore County so that one, there's representation for African Americans and minority voters, but second, so that women are at the table. So also in Baltimore County, the only woman on the council is retiring, and there is a threat to having no women representation on the council. And so I stepped out on faith, put my name on the ballot, won the primary election by 68% of the vote. And I am the only woman that made it out of the primary, and if elected, would become the first African American female elected to the Baltimore County Council. And so after a decade of me volunteering, spending lots of time since I was 15 helping people on campaigns, chairing a local partisan organization, and also participating in many, many, many voters' rights and voter motorcades and voter registration activities over the past decade. The one thing that I always walk away with is representation matters. And so a large part of why people don't vote or they have apathy toward voting is because they believe that people who are in office don't understand their issues, don't represent them. And so it's really important that minorities and women put their name on the ballot because, you know, diversity is important. And our counties and our government agencies cannot be diverse and inclusive if their decision-making bodies do not represent the diversity that they are striving to achieve.
I'm going to swing back to Glynis for a moment. The votercade, as I understand it, is being conducted along with our group, Black Women for Positive Change, and also the Transformation Justice Center under the leadership of Attorney Barbara Armline. That's the Transformative Justice Center. Will you explain in more detail exactly what a votercade is? And how does the John Lewis Good Trouble Memorial Pledge Card work into this?
Okay, the votercade is simply it's a form of like a motorcade, but we're calling it a votercade. We are actually going into, here in Norfolk, we're going to go into 3 separate communities. And we are targeting the low voter turnout communities, the 3 lowest ones here in Norfolk. And what we will do, we will go through the community and make a little noise by tooting our horns and passing out literature and informing the citizens in those areas that the importance of getting out to vote, especially in this upcoming general election. So basically, that's what the votercade is, and so we're really looking forward to doing that. And as far as the John Lewis Good Trouble Voters' Rights Pledge Card, we are also working with that. During our votercade, when we have the opportunity, we will ask people to sign the pledge card or to go to the website for Black Women for Positive Change so that they can electronically sign it. And that way they are pledging that they will vote in the upcoming election. And we are trying to get 10 million signatures.
Mhm.
And so far, several people have already responded. I know that from my contacts that I've sent it out, I'm getting responses by text every day that I just did it. I just signed the voter pledge. And so that's what we are doing.
That is, that's very, very important. Now, Crystal, I want to swing back to you because I know you didn't pop up like popcorn to take this plunge, this plunge into electoral politics. Uh, How how did you find your supporters? I mean, where was your support base, and how difficult is it to raise money? And what kind of opposition are you facing in a time when there's so much um, intimidation and violence going on? So to give me a little bit of that background.
Yeah, so very interesting because it's unique for an African American to win a community where the predominant or the majority of the voter base is not African American. So it's going to be a very unique race. I think, honestly, with me, because I, have been in the community for quite some time. I've worked in the public policy space as a public policy expert, helping legislators on the state, federal, and local level pass policy. I've been, present in the community. I sit on the equitable policing advisory work group and had a very integral role in helping develop policy resolutions for our police department post the George Floyd, incident, to ensure that our police department here in the county is not going to end up having any type of excessive use of force that the nation saw happen with the George Floyd case. And so, because I've had such a very active role, I was also formerly the chair for the Social Action Committee for Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the Baltimore County Alumni Chapter. So I've been active in the community. So in terms of the voter base, women really want to make sure that there is a woman voice on the council. Our county is, as I mentioned before, over 50% women, and to not have to have the threat of not having a woman on the council would take us back to 1956. And I think people care more about that than what color I am. And so that's really, even when I was at the polls, I mean, there were men, women, people of all ages. I think we have reached a point in just society where people are starting to recognize that we're in 2022 and we're still talking about first Black, ... I mean, and sometimes even here in the county with our executive level government seats, this is the first time that Baltimore County appointed a female chief of police in a 200-year history. And I was a part of that interview panel that had the opportunity to make sure diversity came out of that. And so what I have found, and this is why it's so important for people to run, it's very difficult to put yourself out there. It's a decision that you have to make for yourself and your family, because once you get in the public eye, it can be very challenging. But, we want to encourage women. We want to encourage, minorities of all backgrounds to just put your name in the hat, because who better can represent your community than someone who understands the issues?
Now, this is also a question for both of you. What do you say? Now, the midterms are usually not the election that people pay attention to, But this, of course, cannot be the case because the infrastructure has already been set to suppress the black vote. But what happens when you ask a person to join the votercade or to vote for your election, and they say, "Why should I vote when my vote doesn't count?" What's your response? Starting with you, Glynis, and then Crystal.
Okay, that's a great question. Let me just say this. Our mature generations of citizens know the importance of voting. It is the younger generation that we need to focus on. I heard a minister say that the mature generation gets laws passed because they are out there, they're working, they're writing letters, and they're doing all types of things. They are advocating. So, and they advocate for their rights and they use their power of the vote to change things. We need to start educating our children that in a democracy, the best way to have things change is through voting and point out what can happen if they do not exercise their right to vote. We can let them know about certain things, the laws and things that are affecting them, and how important it is that they want to change something, they have to exercise their right to vote. And if they don't, they can't just sit back and complain. I know several youth. I used to work in a high school. They could care less about voting. They'll tell you, oh, let the old people do it, that type of stuff. But we have to let them know that it's very important for them to start looking into their communities and knowing exactly what's going on in their own neighborhoods, their cities, and in their country, that because it can affect them. And we have to make sure that they're educated to know and move forward in voting and make sure that they do.
Crystal, what about you?
Yes. So I am 37 years old. I have been voting ever since I was eligible to vote, and I have never missed an election. And I credit that to my grandmother, who took me to the polls with her when she voted when I was a young tot. So I want to encourage all of our seniors, the parents out there, take your children. We have made it a family event. My grandmother, of course, has gone on to glory, and me, my brother, and my sister, we make it a day. We put a date on the calendar, and we always do early voting, and we go together as a family to vote. It's so important, and I would agree that many young people do not feel that their voice and their vote counts because of the many issues that go on in their community. And this is what I always say. The importance of voting for two reasons. For the minority voter, I always start, it's a right and a privilege, because there was once upon a time when a woman and African Americans were not allowed to vote, and our ancestors fought, bled, and died so that we could exercise that privilege and right in a democracy. And so if that alone doesn't, encourage you to want to get off your behind to go run to the poll, I always go back to this question: what do you want to change in your community when you care about? And most people say these three things. They want better schools, they want more jobs, they want safer communities. And the people that invest and determine where the dollars and the resources go to achieve those goals are the people that you elect at the ballot. When we talk about, mass incarceration is another issue that people care about. Well, our governors and our county executives appoint the people to sit at the Department of Corrections. They appoint the individuals that lead our police departments. So if we really want to make that change, we have to understand that our vote does count, because we're electing the people who are going to ultimately determine our future. So we have to be part of that process.
I want to bring our co-host in on. I know she has some burning questions too before I continue.
Yes, I appreciate your observations, both of you, Glynis and Crystal, on the issues about voting and why it's so important. We used to have civics lessons in our school system, and along with music, civics has been sort of set aside and downplayed within the educational system. How can we repair that? Should our faith leaders, our heads of institutions, our sororities and fraternities, who should take responsibility for filling the gap in the civics education for the young people that you've been describing? And Glynis, yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. One thing I think that we can do as parents and as concerned citizens in our communities, we need to let the school board know that these are some of the things, the civics lesson, and even the music, as you just said, they have been downplayed. We need to let them know that this is something that we need to continue to teach our children because of the importance of it, so that they can learn more about their country and just things that they need to know, especially, and that will lead them to voting and understanding the importance of voting. As far as the community and churches and sororities, fraternities, and other organizations, they can have informative sessions to reiterate and to enforce maybe what's not being taught in the schools, but and to just keep our youth focused on what they need to know about these type of things. And so I think we can start with the school board to make sure that they continue to keep our children educated in these areas. And then local groups and organizations, they can do things outside to have events, community forums. They can have whatever they can do to make it fun for the children as well, so that they can learn about the country and their communities through their civics.
I'd like to ask a question of Crystal, a slightly different question. Okay, so if people were to go to the school boards and begin to ask them to restore civics and music and other things we think are a priority, how important is accountability? I hear a lot of people say that they're afraid to hold elected officials accountable because they fear revenge or that something might happen to them. Should accountability be part of the picture? Should we hold elected officials responsible for what they do or don't do?
Oh, yes. It's an amazing question. And this ties back into why it's important to vote. The best way you can hold someone accountable if they don't deliver on their promise is to vote for the other person. Accountability, that's what the voting is. That's one part of accountability. But the other piece of accountability is showing up, testifying at the hearings, responding, showing up at the town hall, showing up at the budget meetings, really getting involved. And the best way I think to approach it is through what I call a collective impact model. And you may have heard the saying, each one, reach one. So really what that means is whether you're an elected official, whether you are a teacher, whether you're a pastor or a preacher, each one of us can identify our sphere of influence and how we can ensure that we are educating and providing the resources. Because while, it is true that many people, they really don't understand how to hold our elected officials accountable. In Baltimore County, there is an Office of Inspector General that holds the politicians as an independent entity accountable on fraud, waste, and abuse. But in terms of holding the elected officials accountable for delivering on their promises, that the best way to do it is at the polls.
Right now, we should be talking about the urgency of now. We are looking at the January 6th hearings that have been going on, and we have seen how the president, the ex-president, along with white supremacist mobs and congressional support in a violent, planned insurrection, almost took our government away from us, took our democracy away from us, and they are planning to do it again. Are people aware the role of white supremacists will play in this election? Do they talk about it? Do they care about what will happen if Trump gets back in there? Is that an issue? Where I would like to see both of you answer that. White supremacy is on the ballot. We can get it off, but if we don't, it will certainly be back in control. So, how do you see that issue playing out? Any one of you can answer that. You want to take it, Crystal, or Glynis?
Yeah, it's so yes. So the answer is yes. Even in my district, my opponent is actually supported by, that side of the house. And unfortunately, there's lots of things going on. Voter intimidation, even they're weaponizing the media against candidates who could be diverse candidates to try to dissuade voters from voting from them. Or there's so much going on. But I go back to, if we could even just look at the example that Dr. King and those who have fought the good fight as an example of what it means if somebody is going to intimidate you or do something to the point to encourage you that your vote doesn't count, that should be a red flag that your vote actually does count. So we have to make sure that people are getting out to the polls, because we've seen, the insurrection. We saw what can happen, and we have to ask ourselves, if you look at how quick they were able to organize and get down to the Capitol, why can't we as a community organize and get to the polls and get in some good trouble? We have to make sure that we're not just voting, that we're giving of our resources. So we need media to get involved to make sure the correct narratives are being told over the airways. We need our celebrity and our influencers to get involved, to wherever you can reach. That's why we have to go back to what is our circle of influence, because a lot of people who are paying attention to the news knows what's going on. But for the individuals that are spending most of their time working, 9 to 5 and then 5 to 9, they're really oblivious. They hear what's going on, but they really don't know the impact that it will have if they don't get involved. And number two, they don't know how they can be a part of the right side of history, so to speak. So that's why it's important for our community organizations. That's why I commend Black Women for Positive Change, the Positive Change Foundation, for doing this work, because this is just, one piece of making sure that the correct narratives are getting out there, to make sure people understand how to register. And before our time ends, I just want to encourage people, if you are not registered to vote, you need to go to www.iwillvote.com, register, select your state, all of the rules. You can check your registration status. Many people don't know if you've moved within the past 30 days and you didn't update your address. You need to check to see where you're registered so you don't show up at the wrong polling place. These are the various things that are happening, not getting the information out on time. So I'll take a pause there.
Yeah. Glynis, do you see are people that you talk to, they concerned about the role of white supremacy that's showing up in this election, and what's going on in Georgia and other voter suppression laws?
Yes, I agree with everything that Crystal just said. And in our conversations, we know that people know about these groups, the white supremacist groups. We know that they know about it. We know they exist. Just the other day, I was in a section of Chesapeake and I saw a sign in the yard for the former president. It's still in the yard. And so we know about it, they know about it, but it's up to us to try to show people a better way to protest, to do things that they need to do, so that we don't have to go through all of this again. So we know about it, they know about it, and something needs to be done. And I do believe when you elect the right officials, that these things will come to pass.
What we want to see if Dr. Myers, you have a closing question as we come to an end, or closing comment?
Well, yes, I'd like to thank our guests, our esteemed members, Glynis Mason and Dr. Crystal Francis, for their insight. It's so important that people like you and your friends and family realize that you will make good decisions. And that's why it's important for us to take the risk, step out there, as Dr. Reynolds said earlier, and be willing to take on these very challenging times. I wanted to mention that the Transformative Justice Coalition in collaboration with Operation Rainbow Push, is going to have votercades called the Arc of Justice tours that they're going to be going through 23 cities starting here in early October. And people can go on the Transformative Justice Coalition website and see information about getting the 10 million votes that Glynis talked about earlier. They're going to be starting off in Minneapolis, coming through Detroit and Chicago, DC, Richmond, Baltimore, I believe, all through the country. So it's really important that everyone get involved. And again, thank you for your participation today. People can hear, and I want to thank our producer, Damon, who's been excellent. And we appreciate your support, Damon. Damon Naylor.
Well, thank you, and spread the word. Your vote is urgently needed.
Midterm votes matter.